no matter where you work, even if it's a really poor culture, it comes from you. Culture comes from the people in the company, and it starts from you. And I believe if you are happy and you're being able to be yourself and you feel enabled, it spreads to the other person and it will impact. And then before you know it, that culture starts to change.
Leadership Story Talks, where we discuss the practices that engage, motivate, develop, retain, and attract people to businesses. We'll give you principles and tools based on real-world stories to leverage listening and storytelling to become a better leader and management professional. Leadership Story Talks is produced by Narrative, a company that focuses on personal storytelling for business.
Welcome to Leadership Story Talks. Hi, I'm Jerome DeRoy, CEO of Narrative.
I'm Julian Ryan. Nice to see everyone.
Before we move on to introducing our guest, I want to remind our listeners to subscribe to the podcast, leave a review, check out our YouTube channel in this episode's notes, as well as narrative.com/podcast, where you can find all of our previous episodes. So without further ado, today, our guest is Ehsan Fahmi, Client Success Director at the Talent Enterprise. Ehsan is an expert in talent management, talent assessment, and customer success. She's partnered with a diverse range of clients, such as Dubai Airports, Cone, and L'Oreal, to design assessment criteria and culture fit processes that are efficient and predictive. Her passion is to create space for people to just be, being curious, understanding what drives people, and creating solutions that are radical, combined with her values of fairness, creativity, independence, compassion, unlearning, and learning. So as you can see, listeners, lots of alignment with the kinds of things that we talk about on this podcast and the kinds of things we do at Narrative. So Ehsan, I'm really, really happy to have you today. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
And
Cheers. Take it away.
Yes, thank you. So when I was reading and preparing for this interview, I noticed that a certain word keeps popping up in your backstory a lot, and that is psychology. And so I'm very interested in understanding and learning about what drew you to that field and also to the specific areas that you were working in. So we'll start with that.
Sure. So it started really, really young, but I didn't know what it was. I didn't know what psychology was. So me and my mom, we have this habit of watching this very famous soap opera called The Bold and the Beautiful. They used to have it in Dubai, 7 o'clock to 7:30. We used to tape it, we used to record it. And there was this one character, she was a psychiatrist, and she had this big, cool office, a big couch, and she would just get paid to listen to people and their problems. And I turned to my mom and I said, "What is that? Is this a job? Can we do this? What is it called? Like, how do I get into that?" And I think that's the start of it. It's just I knew that I was really good at just listening to people, and I was very curious, but I didn't know what it was. I didn't know what curiosity was even. I just always wanted to know more. And I think that's where it started early on. But I did not study it until later. So I was not in. I wasn't given the access to it in the UAE. We didn't have psychology. It was not popular at the time, and I studied the easiest thing I could do, which was like media and advertising and PR. But then eventually, through life and roadblocks and obstacles, you interestingly do go back to what you always wanted to do when you were a kid. I find that really fascinating, and somehow I ended up here. So that's it in a nutshell.
Terrific.
That's great. And I'm curious, given that that's where, the sort of the passion started. First of all, we're obviously talking about storytelling all the time here at Narrative, and this is a great example of an origin story, something that I'm not going to forget anytime soon. That image of a girl watching the Bold and the Beautiful and being inspired by the psychiatrist on the show. I love that. And great. And I love also what you said about how things kind of come full circle later in life, that maybe that was an idea that was parked for a while, but it was somewhere in your brain. And I can really relate to that because I worked in finance for a long time, went to business school, did all of these, that was sort of my formal training. And then, within all of that, finally in my 30s, sort of came back to, wait a second, there was a creativity piece when I was a teenager that was there and that I was always passionate about. And that's kind of how I came to do what I do now in a more creative field, and marrying the business and the creative. And I wonder for you, Ehsan, how did that sort of spark then come back into your career, into what you're doing now, and how you're working with clients? How does that come back, this sort of area of psychology, when you think of talent and all of these areas that you work in now?
Yeah, so I think, as you said, it's always there, but you don't know how to pursue it. And for me, I think the turning factor in that, and actually it's an experience that I would, it's always going to be where it's the reason as to where I am today. It's because I was made redundant at my first job. So when we graduated, we were the unlucky bunch in the year 2008. It was the financial crisis, the global crisis. It was my first job. I was being paid really well, something around $4,000 per month for a graduate who has zero experience. It was a good job. It was in healthcare, and I was doing PR and marketing and media, and I was let go. And I think if I stayed because of that comfort, a graduate who just came out of university is not going to let something like this go. I don't think I would be where I am today. And having been let go, my mom actually told me the story. She's the one who reminded me. I had no idea. She said, when you were let go, you called me and you were fine. We thought you would be devastated. We were prepared. We were ready to welcome you home with open arms. But all you said to me was, this happened. I'm ready for the next step. What are we going to do? What's that? And I actually was then thinking, I want to pursue psychology now, but I don't know how I'm going to do it, but I will. And I worked for 4 months for a horrible boss, really bad. And I think it was also more of a reason to do what I wanted to do, because it's just people who don't know how to lead, and it's not their fault. They just don't know, right? And I think being on the other side of that leadership or that management or whatever you want to call it, which was really bad and horrible, it made me more aligned and sure that this is the field that I think I want to pursue. But I had no idea what I was going to do when I came back. I thought I was going to be this person who would just sit in an office with a newspaper, like Taylor from Bold and the Beautiful, and have employees come in and tell me their stories. I didn't know it meant consulting. I didn't know what HR was. I just thought, you can do that for employees. That's good. That's easy.
I love the American contribution to world culture.
Exactly. Yeah, it's everywhere.
But I also love what you said about the horrible boss, because in a recent speech I gave to a group of folks, I was like, we talk about thanking the people who made a difference and pushed us forward, but I was like, sometimes we need to look back and thank the people who either annoyed us or made it so torturous that we finally got out of our own way and moved forward. So exactly. A little bit of gratitude, not much sometimes, but something. So I think that
everything happens for a reason.
This is it. If I'm gonna challenge, let me be challenged in what I'm like doing and who I am.
I'm curious, that experience that you were just talking about, Ehsan. One of the things that, I guess, to build on what Jules was just saying, one of the things that we've certainly noticed is that we learn from those terrible experiences, right? And that's the best case scenario, is we learn from it, and then maybe there are things that we put in place. And you were saying that it was something that, even though it was a bad experience, that it's something that you carried something from it into your future roles and current job. Could you tell us a little bit more about maybe the contrast, I suppose? Like, what did you learn from that experience that you're now applying, or maybe it's the opposite of that experience that you're applying? What are some of those elements that you hold dear in what you do?
Yeah, I think, at the time in that experience, and I think this is the challenge with a lot of people who are really young, is we don't know it's not supposed to be this way. In the first interview, she actually said to me, when I say jump, you ask how high. And that was the what she said. And if that's not a red flag, I don't know what that is. But I didn't know that, right? And I just thought, okay, it's in this type of environment where you have to work super hard, and let's just see where it goes. And I stayed only 4 months, because then I got accepted for my postgraduate to do psychology. But it felt like years. It was a fear-driven culture, redundancies. Turnover was really high. People were scared, people were shivering, but there's one good thing that everybody took away from that place, and that's experience. Now, there's one thing I do want to emphasize, is that experience doesn't have to be at the cost of your fear. It shouldn't be that case, but when you're young, people think it should be. And maybe it is, for some people, for whatever reason, but I feel like, you can get excellent experience and be supported and be empowered and be enabled. But that's one thing that I definitely learned to not do as a manager of a team. And I think that's where that whole kindness thing for me comes from, is just be accessible all the time. And that's it. For me, it's just be there when there's tough times, when it's easy, whatever. Just be there. Don't close that door. Answer their phone calls no matter what you're doing. It goes a long way. That's what I've learned.
I'd love it if you could tell us more about that, because I remember when we had our first conversation before we recorded, you were talking quite a bit about kindness and positive assumptions and the role that plays in what you currently do, and specifically in the boardroom. And I wonder, and I know it goes beyond that, but I wonder if you could tell us a little bit about that, the role of kindness and positive assumptions in the boardroom, and why focus on that in your case.
Yeah, I think I think we're all doing amazing things in our lives and in our jobs, and I think sometimes it's a good thing when you have a job title that says director or manager or VP or whatever, but the other side of that is people then view that title as something sacred, and you're this god, and you should be the all-knowing and the all-wise, and you shouldn't be asking for help, and people just kind of view you in that way. And I think that's a danger, because then that person who's sitting in that position is very lonely, because they believe they shouldn't be asking for help. But when you are in these meetings, especially in these management meetings, and everybody has to do their updates and their presentations about their achievements that month or whatever, I'm so fortunate, and I would say it's really important to work in an environment where you could just be completely yourself, and ask for help. And I think there's a lot of politics sometimes that happens in these discussions, and unfortunately people are just a little bit less themselves, in terms of what they choose to present and how they choose to present it. And I just feel like a lot of the clients that I coach all strive to make impact, but they think impact is something you learn in a course. Whereas I think impact is something where it just stems from being a little bit more yourself every day. You will naturally have an impact, and it's not something you have to work hard to do or study these techniques. And well, yeah, there is good tools, but it really the main part of it comes from just being kind to yourself first and foremost. Your job title is just a job title. It doesn't mean you cannot direct. It just means you can't direct today, and I need help. And I think a little bit more and more of that in a culture that enables it. People can come to the boardroom, can come to the table discussing challenges openly and transparently, without necessarily showing something that may not be accurate, because they don't want to look bad in front of their managers and so on.
I give you high marks for saying the word kindness, because that's not something that usually comes up in an organization, and typically in the past. So how did you weave that into your dialogue, or start to introduce that concept in your language? We use a lot of traditional phrases, good communications, positive interactions, but kindness is another layer and speaks to a whole deeper thing. So how did you start to weave that in and engage some good discussions and learning around that?
I mean, I think so. I'm fortunate enough to do a lot of coaching in the work that I do, and I think when I the different types of people that I've coached, men, women, executives, graduates, it doesn't matter. They all have the same challenge. And that challenge is, how do I just be more myself in my job? It's literally, it all comes from the same cause, but it translates in different stories. And I think for me, it's not so much preaching it, but I think it's just being it and doing it as much as I can. And I also want to say something about, kindness. It's not just we as human beings, we have faults. We can't always be there for other people. Sometimes when we are going through what we are going through, we can be disconnected and closed, and that's okay. But I think the problem is sometimes we're too hard on ourselves. Oh, I should have guided that person, or I should have mentored her, or I should have stopped them from making that decision. I'll do better tomorrow. But you're not, because you're just being harder on yourself. And I think at least in these moments when it starts from self-awareness, I think it's okay, and just have the courage to say, hey, I can't help you today, but just give me some space, give me some time. I just need this, and hopefully I'll come back tomorrow and be able to help you. I can't do it today. That's okay too. I think that's the problem. It's like sometimes we're too hard on ourselves. We just think we need to be there for everybody, and that's superhero syndrome, I think I call it, where you're constantly striving for something. I don't know. I feel like for me, it's in the application, and I'm not always a good manager. Sometimes I've definitely been given feedback that sometimes I've been inaccessible, too blunt in what I've said, and I've made a negative impact. And that's okay, and you learn, and as long as you have that culture to come back. There's another thing I would like to emphasize as well with organizational culture. I think no matter where you work, even if it's a really poor culture, it comes from you. Culture comes from the people in the company, and it starts from you. And I believe if you are happy and you're being able to be yourself and you feel enabled, it spreads to the other person and it will impact. And then before you know it, that culture starts to change. Either that or you just go. But I really believe that it's not just always the environment, it starts from you. And yeah.
I'm nodding my head so much that it might fall off, but because there's so much in what you've just said that we could probably unpack for days. But the one thing that I want to start with is where you just ended, which is, it starts with you, and because I agree 100%, and that's also our experience, working with organizations, and particularly this idea of kindness, and how do you move things from having a kind of a negative assumption, or that's where we start, is with the sort of, what do they want from me, or that kind of thing, and or how am I going to show up, and so we put on this facade, etc. And when you actually start with kindness, you show up differently when you have a positive intention. And so for us, it's really, that all has to do with listening. And really the way that we listen informs the way that people are going to respond to you. And we often think that it's the way we speak that's going to inform how people will respond to us. But actually, it's the opposite. It's the way we listen that informs that. So our tendency is to want to speak right away, say all the things that I have to say, and put it out there, and then see what happens, right? As opposed to actually doing the other thing, which is much harder and much more uncomfortable, is just to sit there and listen and ask questions and let that come to you, and then respond and see what happens from there. It's not, I just wanted to make that connection with our work, because it's so aligned. And we often say, if not always actually, that listening starts with you. Because that's the other thing, is that we think that it's other people's fault that they're not listening well. And so we don't sort of look at ourselves and say, wait a second, maybe there's a way that I could be listening that could be different, because that's the only thing I can control. That's the only thing I can shape. I can't control other people's listening.
Yeah.
I want to make a comment, because when Jerome introduced us to each other, and I went on the website, I went, oh, psychometrics, heavy into assessment, but you're introducing a whole different dimension, and I want to hear more about the work, because you've spent most of the time emphasizing the human part, and that the end, every time we ask you a question, you're like, but I coach. So the clinical assessments, I'm sure they're brilliant and they're doing good things, but it's that combination with the human listening, I suspect, and the line of sight into who's presenting in front of you, their behaviors, is the powerful combination. So I'd be curious to hear more about your work and how your values inform how you use those tools and how you.
Yeah. Yeah. So in my job, I a big part of my responsibility is to spend time with our customers and with our clients, who are typically your HR directors, right? And they come to you with a very typical challenge of, I need to know my people better to help them improve and to help them be better leaders. And that's great, right? And they have their agenda, they have their talent management strategy that they need to apply. The cool thing, and I'm very grateful for, is I get to deliver some of that work. So you're sitting with these individuals, and through our assessments, specifically with psychometrics, and personality assessments and strength-based assessments, what I love about it is it's not about identifying necessarily what you need to develop, but it's also identifying where those natural strengths come from. And that's something that is popular now, and we're talking about it more because it's all about being able to be productive faster, and it starts with self-awareness. And I'm so happy to see that a lot of the people that we're sitting with are having self-awareness. Nobody comes to these assessments thinking they do well, but they actually didn't perform well. When somebody has just zero self-awareness and you have to break it to them, these conversations are the toughest. But a lot of them are already aware, they know where their weaknesses are, they're curious, they want to hear more. And so when you're breaking down factors such as grit and resilience and growth mindset, these are huge concepts in itself. And to be able to translate that in an hour, you can take ages. You can take 2 hours to have these rewarding conversations with them. But that's for me where the passion comes from, is just defining these factors and understanding from them. Because at the end of the day, it's all about them. It's about listening to them and understanding how are they able to apply it. And no matter what they are, whether they're a doctor or a surgeon or an executive or a graduate, resilience means resilience, but you apply it in different ways. And that's the cool part. It's understanding these differences, and how it makes them more effective as leaders.
I really appreciate everything you're saying, and I'm curious about this idea of how we've been talking about listening and assessments, and now describing how you coach people, and that it doesn't really matter who you're coaching because the approach is always the same. And I wonder what the role of storytelling is in your coaching on the could you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so I think specifically when it comes to coaching, it's more the type of questions you ask, and just seeing what comes up. And I think really one of the things that helps in coaching is also improvising, because you can't stick to a process. You can put the process in place with the type of questions you ask, but you have to just let it be. And a major part of why coaching can be challenging is people are trying to control the conversation and the flow. And we're also too eager to want to help this person achieve what they're meant to be achieving. And that's not on you. It's not on anybody. It is what it is. And I think that's the struggle. It's letting it just be. And the fact that, we're listening for an hour, even if you don't ask any questions, goes a long way. But storytelling for me, I would say, is more effective when I'm trying to explain what I do to clients, because the jargon, everybody wants to sound smart with the words that they use, and talent management and succession planning. But for me, it's just simplifying that. What does that mean to you? What does an ideal picture look like for your organization? What do you want your leaders to be doing? And this is how we can help you. And I see it everywhere. It's down to how we sell, to how we facilitate these discussions. And you can use it everywhere. But I think with coaching, it's more, for me at least, it's more the type of questions that we ask.
The work when you were coaching and using storytelling, it's a bridge to help look at ourselves a little different, first and foremost, as the client, and then figure out how we can use that bridge to reach somebody else so they see us in a new way. We're coaching, and you're coaching folks, and Jerome is, to present different scenarios maybe at some point so they can go out into the world with their teams or their vendors or their clients and show up a little bit more. They think they're doing it, but it's not happening. So is there somebody that stands in your mind that had this transformation, that they really start to own their space when the lights went on and you gave them some good, valuable advice?
Yes, that definitely happens in these coaching conversations and feedback discussions when it's one-to-one between you and the individual. A lot of them already know, and that's why they're here to be coached. They already know, but I think they probably want another, they just want another intervention, or maybe they're stalling. But yeah, definitely it has happened where I can't remember the conversation, but all I remember was the person's reaction. She said, "I am not in the right job, and I've spent too long here, and I'm not who I am, and I can't wait for the next phase." So the cool thing was, and I'm grateful for this, is that she took it in a positive way. Some people would think of it like, "Oh no, oh, I have made this big realization and now I have to work towards it." But this person was actually excited. And she said, she openly said, "I'm not in the right position, and I just can't wait for the next phase, and I'm ready." And that's the impact. The cool thing is the impact that we see after months and months of developing these leaders. And it's not just women. I just want to emphasize, a lot of men struggle from the same issues of authenticity and imposter syndrome as well. And I'm so happy to hear them express it. It's amazing. It's beautiful, but they all have, it's very similar challenges, but they just get this sparkle. They're passionate. A year after coaching some of these guys, they've come to me and they've said, "I'm no longer who I was." And I'm so excited for the next level and the next stage and the next phase. And when I think about where I was before and where I am now, I'm so happy to know that I've worked on myself, and that's it. And it doesn't stop. I mean, it just keeps going. But for me, I also like to emphasize, and I hope they take this away as well, is celebrate those wins, because we tend to also move too quickly, and we want the next achievement and the next level, but we don't really celebrate those milestones.
Yeah, reminds me of a lyric of a song I heard yesterday. It says, "Don't forget to sing when you win."
Yeah.
So yeah, celebrate those wins.
And eat ice cream.
Yes, and eat ice cream. Exactly. Love that. Yeah, no better way to be kind to yourself than to celebrate your win, eat ice cream, and sing. I have to share one thing, because a story before I ask you to tell us another story, Ehsan, which is there, because something you said prompted me to think about this experience. That once these words like director, consultant, etc., they carry some meaning, and mostly for people who are not consultants or directors, etc., but maybe even for people who are, they carry assumptions as well, about what it is, and often those assumptions turn out not to be true. And you made me remember this story, and Jules will recognize it, because this is something we do often. In our work, we always start with listening, very similar to what you were just talking about. And one of the things that we talk about are obstacles to listening, things that get in the way of your ability to listen to someone else. And one of those things are titles. The titles that somebody has, it makes me feel like, well, maybe I can speak to them a certain way or not, or I have to be a certain way or not. So all these things come into play. And as a result, I might stop myself. And I remember this one time where we did this exercise where we asked people to tell a story about a family member, from generations before, and as a way to kind of remember that heritage. But instead of saying it, this is the story of, you were that person. So going back to the idea of improvisation, right? Don't give any instructions. You just say, introduce yourself as that person. And I remember the CEO of the company doing this in a particular way. And up until then, he'd been very quiet. And the only times that he'd intervene was to say that he had to take a call with his board. But he did agree to do this exercise finally with everybody else. And as we went around and then he told his story, afterwards, we asked people to reflect on how those stories were and what they did. And so many people said to his face, I trust you so much more now. I can see that you're actually human, and I can see that everyone's human here. So it's interesting, these labels, it doesn't take much to forget those labels and or not to forget them, but to set them aside and see the humanity. And I think that's what we all have in common on this podcast right now. And I'm sure our listeners as well and viewers as well will relate to this, is that idea that, there's a human being there. And what we're interested in finding is, who is that human being? And I truly believe, and you've reinforced this, Ehsan, so thank you for that, is that, you seem to have the same belief that there's a human being there that's genuine and authentic, and let's go find that person, because everyone will benefit once that person is really there.
Exactly. Yeah. 100%.
So speaking of that, I who that human being is, et cetera, you've told us a couple of stories that we've really enjoyed, but I wonder if there's an experience that you've had that really has kind of informed the rest of your career, something that has shaped who you are today, that you still think about. Of course, there's The Bold and the Beautiful, and there's 2008. So maybe it's those, but I wonder if there's something else as well.
Yeah, I would say it's always important to check in with yourself, no matter where you are in life, because sometimes how you see yourself is different to how others see you. And I think this happened in COVID. Morale was down, everything stopped. There was no funding. Customers were not coming to us. And we all got together as a team to virtually to help, connect with each other and learn more about each other's lives. And I remember, I had a smaller team that I was, working with at the time, and we had a really good dynamic of playing games here and there, and kind of try and connect and so on. But then there was this one period, I think it was probably just after COVID, but it was still during COVID, and there was a lot of challenges. There was a lot of work that was coming our way because now everything was open, and things got really, really busy. And I remember there was a lot happening as well, personally, professionally. And I had a wake-up call because I would hear from many of my close friends and colleagues that I would say things, but I had no memory of it. They would say, you said this and it made me feel negative, or it made me feel this way. And I had no memory of these conversations and of these things that I would just say so flippantly. And it just made me realize that, it's again, there was a lot going on, but it just made me realize that your words can have such a huge impact, even if you think it was a joke, or if you typically just thought it was in conversation or was in passing. So I would say it's really important to always ask for feedback, because I think the worst thing is when you might say these things and no one tells you, no one comes up and says, hey, you actually hurt my feelings. And it just kind of happens, or it comes up 6-7 months later. And I think that was for me a wake-up call to take things slower. No matter where you are in life, you're not saving lives. I'm not a doctor, but my dad was the one who actually first noticed that I was going too fast, but I didn't want to listen to him. And then I just thought, okay, I need to just slow down a little bit. And slowing down doesn't mean not being productive. It doesn't mean doing 2-3 things in a day. It just means checking in with yourself more, and being genuine, And my cousin, who's a doctor, he shared this cool exercise. So when he drives home, he just reflects on his day. Should I have done this better with that patient? Did I advise in the right way? Tomorrow I'm going to do better. And that was it. It's like 5-10 minutes of quick reflections. And I haven't applied it yet because my drive is only 15 minutes. I have time for like one event. But I really think it's something important that people can do, is just every day check in. How did that day go? Do I need to show up? Do I need to apologize? Do I need to check in with anybody? And then we start again tomorrow. So yeah.
Love it. What great insights and advice. And very, very inspiring. I really appreciate everything you've said, and your willingness to also take your own experiences, even the negative ones, the challenges you've had, mistakes made, etc. I think you're kind of walking the talk here. And there's a lot of people who put on a good face to these things, but it really comes across that you're really breathing this stuff, it seems. And I really appreciate that. I wonder if there's any practical recommendations that you would want to leave our listeners and viewers today.
Oh, there's a lot, but I would say maybe for me the biggest thing is just remember to always check in with yourself and start from somewhere in terms of self-awareness, and knowing yourself better is for me the first step to anything. It's even before knowing how to just be kind and compassionate to someone. It's knowing yourself and what you can do and what you can't do. I think that for me would be the biggest thing. Maybe the second thing is, just not assume negatively. People who come in late, I mean, even if they come in late and they're unapologetic, it has nothing to do with you. They just believe it's okay and it's appropriate, and let's just carry on, right? So I would say, I mean, for me, these are probably two things that, that I would share.
Love it.
Appreciate you sharing what you did before about your father input and also your cousin's suggestions. So this was a big conversation, because to parallel back to the earlier part is the conversation about coaching. There can be the illusion or the image you want to project of all knowing, all perfect, but that doesn't sustain you very long if we're not growing and learning. And I like the fact that you do what I call let's repurpose this for good. So it's like a human sustainability exercise that you're like, well, that went epically wrong.
Yeah.
What can I do with this? And where can I find the gift, play it forward in a better way? So
and I would just add just the third thing that came to my mind when you said that is also just be courageous. And somebody shared with me that typically some of the worst leadership styles is when they make a decision and they hide because they think it's just going to kill itself. But that is the time to be there for your team and be accessible and show up, even if you're not feeling up to it. I'm here, guys. How can I help you? We are all in this together, and consistently repeat the same message. Somebody shared this with me a couple of days ago, and I found it inspiring.
Yeah. I think a great way to end our interview. I feel like we could go on for a long time. There's so much to discuss and unpack, but we do have to stop there. And I really, really thank you for all these insights once again. And if our listeners want to learn more, they'll be able to look at our notes, the episode's notes, and find out more about you as well. So right now, what I'd love to say is just thank you to you, thanks to Jules, and thanks to our listeners for being here, and our viewers on YouTube as well. And say that if you've been inspired by this particular recording, please consider enrolling your team in our training programs that support sales, leadership development, and team building, and many other areas as well. Always starting with a positive intent and this approach that we've been talking about in this podcast.
And I love the fact we're so many thousands of miles away in different cultures and so many things in common about the human experience. So we are more, related than we give ourselves credit for so many times.
100%.
So thank you for showing up and sharing.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. And thanks everyone for listening. And once again, don't forget to subscribe and leave a review on your favorite podcast platform. And also go to our YouTube channel, as that is all what drives the word of mouth. So until next time, thanks again.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
For more information on the narrative listening and storytelling method and how it can help your business, go to narrative.com.